So the Multiversus story continues to unfold even though the game is on its way of being kaput. It's very interesting. What's happening, Internet? Kwing here, and today we're discussing the foreclosure of the game developer known as Player First Games, the creators of Multiversus, and the reasons why will shock you. At least they shock me. Now, keep in mind the following information is a rumor, so take it with a grain of salt. We don't know if this is true or not, so it sounds like it matches up with other things that I've heard while the game has been in development. And, well, both WB and Tony are to blame, but also WB and Tony were kind of, well, also not to blame. So it gets confusing. And also there are members of Tony's team that were not on the up and up either. So we're going to discuss all of this. What a lot of people believe is the reason why Player First Games was closed has to do with a power struggle between Warner Brothers and Player First Games. And that is mostly true. Player First Games was holding out on characters for personal and petty reasons, and WB told them to put them in no matter what. Player First Games said they were going to do a walkout if WB forced them to include characters that they personally did not like, as well as they thought would cause problems if they were in their game. Not problems based on they were worried about the inclusion, but they personally didn't like the characters to begin with because of what to them the characters represented something bad. Which again gets really crazy, and from a common sense point you're kind of like, what? But yeah. At the same time, Tony also did things that were very, we'll say, not on the up and up. Tony was a person who saw the possibility, according to rumors, that the Smash Bros. Clone could make them a boku amount of money, especially by including microtransactions for characters that people really liked, but at the same time giving ridiculous outfits and themes that people would have to be forced to play in order to unlock certain aspects of the game. So the really crazy cheapo skins that I hated are responsible because of Tony and Tony's greed. And, you know, so some of the things that I've heard about that did match up. That works. At the same time, it's not just microtransactions and not listening to the fans that's one of the core reasons that the game failed. The power struggle between WB and Player First Games is very, very real, as well as something that WB did not forgive Player First Games for doing. Now, in order to talk about this, we're going to have to go back in time so you can kind of understand the mindset that Player First Games had while they were working on this game. But the character that we'll be talking about is a very controversial character to non-gamers, which is Harry Potter and the world of Harry Potter. And all that stems from a hatred of the author. Now, personally, I don't like the author's stance on a lot of things, but one of the reasons why I don't like her is it has to do with her religion, because her religion is the exact opposite of mine, and that's all I'm going to say. Thankfully, she doesn't really attribute a lot of her beliefs into her writing, but, you know, the wizarding world is different than that of some supernatural forces in the real world. So that's good. At the same time, I'm more of a grown-up than most people, and I understand that Harry Potter is a fictional character, and Harry Potter hasn't done anything to me because he's just words and paper. So Hogwarts Legacy had a huge crisis involved with it, and cancel culture tried to get rid of, you know, Hogwarts Legacy. They failed miserably, but they still tried. They also created a brain rot syndrome for anything associated with Harry Potter. Now we go back to the future with Player First Games. There were some people in the Teamsters, or team, or whatever you want to call it, that suffered from brainworms, basically, and an outward hatred of anything Harry Potter because of the author. I know it sounds silly and petty, but it's true. At least what I've heard from people. And Warner Brothers, who sees Harry Potter as a cash cow, wanted to have the inclusion of Harry Potter in their game because they knew that it would sell. They could milk costumes. I mean, who wouldn't want to buy a Hermione or a Harry Potter like beach costume, or Harry Potter and Snape and Halloween costumes, or whatever, you know? There's a lot of potential transactional stuff that could have happened because of Harry Potter, and the developer said no to Warner Brothers. How they were able to say no to Warner Brothers, I'll have no idea. But Warner Brothers apparently told them during development of the game to include Harry Potter, and they lied and said they were working on it. And then when it was on hiatus, they told them again and pressured them to put Harry Potter in the game, and Player First found a way of skirting the issue. And then apparently last year they came out and they told WB that they would not have Harry Potter in. And the reason was absolutely ridiculous, but that's how I first heard about it. Before, I always thought it was like, well, you know, maybe there's some problems and WB doesn't want to have Harry Potter in the game. No. Harry Potter was supposed to be in day one, and that was one of the core things that WB was pushing alongside Justice League characters and Looney Tunes, is they wanted to have Harry Potter's universe represented in the game. And, you know, Game of Thrones was kind of popular. Harry was supposed to be the focus. It didn't happen. And, you know, I think the reasoning behind it is stupid and petty, but it gets worse. So apparently, Harry Potter's hatred also stemmed to the hatred of another author who's been long dead, and that's Tolkien. Now, Tolkien, if you don't know, he's the man responsible for The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, as well as The Silmarillion and a bunch of other stuff. Like, he is a fantasy writer. And the reason why a lot of Wokies hate him is because he was a Christian. He was a very intelligent Christian who wrote very subtle nuances about faith and religion into his books. Whereas The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien was going out to make a fantasy story for his family, and he incorporated smart little breadcrumbs leading to the identities of some characters, such as Gandalf and the elves being angels, and of course Tom Bombadil being, well, you know who he's supposed to be. And they hate The Lord of the Rings. So of course you can't have Lord of the Rings in the game. Now, they've been saying for years that, you know, Gandalf was data mined and all this other stuff, but when you bring people into the game that hate certain things and won't allow certain things because it goes against their personal beliefs and their feelings and emotions, I mean, you're already doomed to fail anyway. Which, when some of these people were adamantly stomping their feet and throwing a tantrum at Player First, saying, we're going to walk out if you force us to put the evil Harry Potter into our game, at that point in time, I hate to tell you this, Warner Brothers should have just fired them and brought in people who would actually listen to what they had to say. The fact that Player First Games had this much authority over a big studio is puzzling to me. I know some of you are going to say that The Lord of the Rings is currently owned by Amazon, which is why they're able to do Rings of Power, and that's why Gandalf and other characters couldn't be included in the game. It has nothing to do with personal animosity toward Tolkien. And I would say you are partially right, but also not. And what do I mean by that? Well, I recently learned that the Lord of the Rings franchise, namely the film rights, is still in possession by WB. That means if WB wanted to, they could make a new Lord of the Rings video game, which they did make a mobile game recently, or they could make a new film, which there's been rumors they're going to make a new one, and Peter Jackson has even hinted it. So even though the Rings of Power is a thing on Amazon, and they have, you know, the book rights mostly, even though they're not following the books, the film rights are still held by WB, as well as the characters that appeared in their films. So the depictions of Gandalf and Legolas that have appeared in Warner Brothers properties is the, basically, IP of WB. They can do with whatever they want with the Orlando Bloom or the Gandalf version that we saw. They can continue to incorporate those characters if they want to. But apparently they hit a brick wall when they were working with Player First Games, and Player First Games said no. And apparently there's other characters that Player First Games said no to, but we don't want to jump down that rabbit hole. This will be like a 3-hour video. Now, I don't know if anybody's going to mention Embracer Group in the comments section below, but I can kind of tell you who Embracer is. They're the current video game rights holder of Lord of the Rings. They also own a bunch of other gaming studios, such as Eidos, Montreal, Crystal Dynamics, and Gearbox. And they have been slowly releasing new Lord of the Rings games, especially in 2023 with Gollum, which we don't need to address that game again now, do we? But supposedly they have other Lord of the Rings games in development that will eventually release. But as I mentioned before, WB does retain the film rights to Peter Jackson's version of Lord of the Rings, and that is the version of Gandalf we were going to get in the game. He was data mined very early in the game. In subsequent updates and data mines, Gandalf is no longer there, and people like to choose the easy path and be like, well, it was probably because of copyright and, you know, Amazon and, you know, Embracer Group. But based on personal observations of some of the people that worked at Player First Games and their outward hatred on their Twitter profiles about Lord of the Rings and other things, I think that Gandalf would have had a very difficult time because of certain individuals to appear in Multiverses. He might have gotten in eventually, but it would have been a hard-fought battle for WB to have Player First Games do it without rooting out some evils, so to speak. Basically firing people. But I do feel bad for some of the people that worked at Player First Games that lost their job or will be losing their job. It's always sad when a game studio closes. At the same time, though, the people that are responsible for some of the problems that happened that resulted in the closure of their studio, I don't really have sympathy for. Had Player First Games probably had a more open dialogue and communication with Warner Brothers and compromise, then, you know, maybe the game would still be around. But to blame it all on the microtransactions and the gameplay and stuff when there's other things that are going on under the surface that people don't want to bring up because it's taboo. As I've said before, adamantly, the truth is not something that's going to be your friend. The truth is the truth. The truth is pain. The truth is wisdom. Sometimes when you learn things, it's through actually suffering or from something unpleasant. It's not something that is going to help you in your life and make you happier or joyous. It's just going to help you open your eyes more. And that's basically what the truth is. You can change reality as much as you want, but you can't force reality to change for everyone else. And some of these people tried to do that. And some of these people tried to, you know, hold to their convictions and their weird beliefs and prevented basically the game succeeding. And you can either take that as, you know, truth or hearsay. It's up to you. But I choose to believe that actually makes a lot of sense, especially when you see what the game industry has been coming out of the past 6 years. It really makes a lot of bells in my head go off and be like, okay, that definitely is a clear indication of what's going on, or at least part of it. So anyway, that's it for me, people. Thank you so much for listening to this Multiversus thing. Hopefully you guys had a good one. And in the comment section below, tell me what you think about all this. Do you think that Tony and his team were responsible for some of the problems that happened that led to the foreclosure of their studio? Or do you think that it was actually WB's fault and that somehow they are still the villains of their own story, even though they just wanted certain popular characters to be added into the game and they were repeatedly told no? Let me know. Anyway, I'll see you guys later today with an awesome live stream on something else, and there'll be more gaming topic videos as they happen, and I hope you guys will stay tuned for that, especially something Pokemon related. That should be a lot of fun. Until then, God bless, happy gaming. Thanks so much for watching. Remember to turn on all those notifications if you haven't already, because only 4% of you have them on, which is why the channel looks the way it does. So please consider doing that. It'd be a big help to us. And take care, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. See you next time.